All right, we got the bike prepped basically to get ready to start running our wire in a temporary fashion. I have the M-Unit in its place, the start solenoid's in its place, and the battery is in its place. So I won't focus very much on the battery connection and that kind of stuff during this segments, but basically I'm wanting to take and run my wires. I will not connect them or cut them or anything like that. That will be placed into this. That will just be left in excess and they'll be tagged, and then I'll run them in a coordinates because I plan to build a mount in here, or a plate in here that'll tie all the connections that'll go through. I like to have all of my connections come back and be hidden inside the bike so you can't see them. So when you have just your typical harnesses out, that's all you'll see. You won't have all these big bulky connectors and things, even though this connector won't be used, but you won't have all these big bulky connectors all out here to be seen. They'll be hidden underneath the bike. What I typically do is I set my table up. I have a barrage of wire here. I use just some masking tape. You can use whatever tape you want, a Sharpie, and then my drawing. I'll get a pencil so I can actually come in through here and I'll label where the wire is coming into the M-Unit. I'll label what color it is, and at the termination point I'll label it again what it's going to be. The controls, we already have a video on this, so check out the description, or look at the link that's on there and I'll talk about this. But anyways, all these already have their colors in here. So the wires that's got to go up to that connector, I'll go ahead and label like that. So everything that'll need to be labeled, like I said, I use a piece of tape and I tape it where it goes to on this end, and what it goes to on this end. So that way I know when I go to actually terminate it and put the connectors on there, I have that all set up. Once I have a decent bundle starting and they start getting kind of crazy and stuff, I use the electric tape, and I just create a little band around it to strap all the wires together. So in case I need to make an addition or whatever, I can easily cut the band right off and apply my new additional wires, etc. on there. So at this point we're just basically doing basic wiring, and that's running it from point A to point B, and there will be excess length added to it so I can trim it once I go to make the final harness, and then we'll touch base. So I'm going to pause here, and then I'm not sure how I'm going to do this on the video because it's kind of lengthy to just sit here and run wire, so I may do segments of it and show you what I got going on so far, and then touch base in and out. So stay tuned, we'll have more. Okay everybody, we have the camera set up to view down. So I've already pre-selected my colors. I'm going to start with the handlebar controls first. So I have taken my drawing, and I'm kind of hoping I'm at the right direction. And I've wrote down my colors on here so they correspond. So I will go ahead. These are the 18 gauge wire, and this is just for the signals going back to the M-Unit. So we will go ahead and start running those out, and I'll most likely be speeding up the video in between these segments so it won't take so long. So we will get started. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I've pre-measured the first one. So now that I have my basic length, I can go through all of these spools and cut them all the same size. The reason I'm running independent wire versus using the Mo button is, my personal opinion is the Mo button's great if you have one solid set of handlebars. if you have clip-ons like this, you still have nearly the same amount of wiring, and I consider the wiring to be much more of a hassle trying to run it through the handlebars simply to tie over to the other handlebar. So it's just, for the amount of wires, the cost difference, for clip-on handlebars, the Mo button is just not practical. So I prefer to run individual wires for the controls. Even if I was using push buttons, I can still run a single wire for my ground to tie in all the switches, and then just the actual signal wires on there for each one of the buttons. And you still come out with less wiring or less hassle of wiring. So we will go ahead and speed the video up, and then we will pre-cut all these to length, and then I'll come back. So now all the wires for this front have been cut to length. So what I'll take and do is get them all adjusted to the same length or to lined up with each other, since I cut them to identical lengths. Get them all set. And then this is where I take my vinyl electric tape, and I will come back a few inches from the end, and because I'm gonna have to tag each one of these. So I just put a simple little band on it, and then come down a little bit farther and do the same thing. You're just trying to keep the bundle organized and at the same length. All right. So something I didn't think about was when I was running this for my hazard switch, because I'm not used to having the hazard using these kind of controls, is they splice into the left and right turn signal. So I applied an actual color for it. So, but being that they're already run, most likely what I'll do is I want a different color for those for this particular purpose, just so you don't mess with putting the wrong connector pin when you do your connector. So what I'll do is I'll most likely cut them off back into the harness a bit for that particular color and splice them in as it would be shown in the drawing. So at this point I'll continue on, but I'll know this will need to be spliced into here, and they won't need to go all the way back to the Motogadet. So at this point I'll continue labeling it, and we'll move on next. Okay, now that those are all labeled, I bent these back, and I will note that these need to be spliced farther up into the actual harness itself. So we're going to take a break here, and I'll be back, and we'll be moving to the next section. And I went ahead and took the liberty of removing the excess of the two wires from the hazard. I went ahead and clipped them. I set them back farther in the harness so that they would have some room in case I need to adjust this as far as length when I cut it down. So I wanted to make sure it was back far enough in the harness. So basically what I'm going to do is show you how I would splice them in. So you can, this is my way. I've done it for a long time. I've done it on many bikes, and manufacturers do it in their harnesses. If you've ever taken a OEM harness apart, you'll see this is exactly how they've done it, and most of these harnesses have lasted 10, 20, 30, 40 years plus. So if that method works, I'm going to stick with it. So what I do is I'll come in here and I'll splice in between. So I take the strippers and I just score the wire, and then I take my straight edge, so you have to be careful with this, and try to split it. And then it allows you to peel the wire back, like so. And then that leaves you with a little gap. So I need to get a small blade screwdriver, flat blade screwdriver. So, okay, now we have a flat blade screwdriver, and what I do is I'll spread those strands apart. So in the interim, what I need to do is, on my drawing, the brown and orange wire from the turn signal, which is the left, comes over and it's spliced in with the green and black. So I have to take the green and black, green and black right here, and I'll trim the end off, like so. Take the screwdriver and try to divide up some of the strands and create a loop like so. Hopefully you can see it. And then I take this and run it through there, divide up the strands, and bend them back around to themselves, and then loop over. So what that does is it ties them in well, and then I can put them in my assisted fingers here, make sure they're good and tightened in, pull the section back, and then solder them. And I need to clean it. Sorry, I've been a little unprepared here. Cleaning the tip of the solder, I just use a standard paper towel. You can use a sponge, use a wet sponge, you could use the brass thingy that they use. I just take them, go fast with wiping it down. Doesn't burn it as long as you don't sit there and keep it on there. So now that I have a nice clean tip, pre-add a dab of solder to the end. By doing that, it makes it easier to get flow into your solder, or to your wire bundle that you're soldering together. And voila, it's soldered. See, it depends on the type of soldering person you are. The bigger the blob, the better the job. I guess that's what the old saying is. So now that I have that soldered together, what I'll do, and this was done on many OEM wire harnesses, they use just standard electric tape, no heat shrink, and isolate it and put it on there. So now it's taped up, and when the harness is completely sealed, that's never going to affect anything. So now what I'm going to do with the other wire is I'm going to come in with my clippers, and I'm going to clip probably 1.5 inches so it sets back farther so that the two splices aren't on top of each other. And this is the other wire, so it's going to tie into the tan. So what we do is take, again, the strippers, splice it in. I don't like to cut like this because you have a risk of actually cutting the wire. So I do it this way. You just have to be very careful when you do it because you're working with a razor blade. And sometimes it doesn't cut all the way through, but it does score it. And then once you get it started, you know, a pair of needle nose. I happen to have a little bit of a thumbnail here, so I'm able to pull on it. And voila, we have that. Strip the purple wire. And then once again, take the screwdriver, poke it in there, try to split it up, make a loop in it, run this through, and then spread these apart doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have exact number of wires going around. It's just a way to keep them bonded together easier. Voila, it's together. Put it on my magic fingers here, and we'll do a little solder work. Voila, it's another one done. Again, tape it. Small piece, couple wraps, it'll be enough. And there you go. You can see they're staggered so they won't hurt each other. So, okay, one thing I forgot also is I didn't add the clutch switch and the brake switch line. So I need to add those. So I'm gonna go ahead and add those into the line. The brake will need to be spliced. So I will splice that in and then we'll come back with the 2 additional wires that needed to be. That's why I put the little bands on. It just keeps it together. They're easily, with the razor knife, you're able to split them and make your addition, or you can just add them over the top and put another band on. This time I chose to split the bands and add new stuff on there. All right, so now I've had the clutch and the brake on. The brake will need to be spliced in, but I will do that later once the harness is much farther along and I start having points where I strap it to the frame, so that way when I have my brake switch and everything, my rear set's on, I'll be able to determine how to route the wire and where the best place is to splice into it. But at the most point, this is our signal section of the harness. And we will start probably on the main power section of the harness, and that's where we will run the ground. And then and this will follow the same path as this particular harness, so they'll be tied into this. So we'll start with the power section, like I said, in the ground, and then the ground will come in here to strap, and then from the actual control wires, those will come in and the ground strap will feed it. So there's no need to run multiple grounds through the wire harness to reduce the amount of wires that you use. So to keep it short, the wire harness will be just one ground coming through. You know, I do have the chassis, but you can never have enough grounds in your frame. So the frame is still going to be grounded to each other, the subframe to the main frame, but we'll still run a ground from the moto unit all the way up and tie it to a single tie-in point where all the controls, the lights, etc. will all run off of, and it'll tie into that same point. So we'll come back, I'll have everything set up, we'll do the main wiring.